I am. Doing the talk today is very difficult. There are assorted reasons for it being difficult. One, my mouth feels as if I had a seizure last night. I don't know. The only way I can know I have a seizure is if somebody tells me I did. They say, you had a seizure, because I don't remember anything about it. The other reason is the extemporaneous nature of this talk can cause me to wonder about what I've talked about, whether it's important, what use is it? Is it really therapeutic? And sometimes the nature of the world is so and this has changed in my lifetime, so I know that I'm not biased in a sense. I think I'm looking at it pretty objectively. The world has, and the mood of the world has become more inane than it ever has. I blame that, of course, on phones. And at the same time, they're so important. They allow communication, they allow receiving and exchanging data that is really important. We can order food and we can do all sorts of things. As I've said before, I don't have a phone, and I hope that I die without a phone. The process or the coming into existence of phones is very, very dubious as far as I'm concerned. They could have been even more, let us call it, creative than they are. Right now, what they do is they just get people's attention, and that's that. They're gone. I no longer say hello to people who are on their phones because they are not aware of me or the world around them. So I pass them by. I say hello to people who meet me eye to eye. So on my walk, there are people who are still off their phones at times. I do know that they go on their phone when they're in the house or at dinner or whatever. But when I'm on my walk, which was short today, when I'm on my walk, there are people who are engaged. There's a man who walks, and I see him every now and then. He also walks. We greet each other with smiles or bows or hellos. There are people doing chores. I greet them with hello. The phone has created that kind of inanity because of why and how it's how it exists, I guess. Once all the corporations knew that they could sell stuff, they could advertise things through the phone. It became an advertising tool, not a creative tool, an advertising tool. It advertises all of people's commodities. So, that's what it is. Everybody carries it around, they use it. I will be on phones as a redundancy forever. One of these days I will go through the entire gestation of phones, of these phones, not the phone that was on the wall in the house, but the phone that people carry with them everywhere. I will go through that completely and fully. At the moment, I just want to speak of the difficulty of doing this. It feels good to talk. I'm sort of distracted by the workers next door who seem to be getting ready to do something. At times, I feel like I'm in jail here. I've spoken about that several times. I make the best of it. As I said, I go for walks, I work out, I do my thing. But in terms of playing music, there's no place to play music anywhere. Even when I walk through the street, I can get in trouble. It's not like it's because I'm asking for money, because I'm not. It's because people don't want me to do it, period. So, it feels like that, and it wears on me at times. These people next door exaggerate that for me. People on both sides, one making noise and the other telling me to be quiet. So it makes me feel hemmed in, and I am hemmed in. And our puppy, who I am guardian for, I take it seriously. As a guardian, I am extremely fastidious, I guess. I am very much a good caretaker. I think that's from my sensitivity about everybody, my sensitivity that was developed because of becoming conscious too early. I'm looking at this palm leaf that has fallen off the tree. I spoke of it previously, and it's brown and inert. It's died. Yesterday it was attached to the palm tree, and I knew that it was going to come down one of these days, very close. And there it is, it's down. However, because of its branch-like way, or how it connects to the palm tree, it is hanging from its fruit. The fruit has burst from the bottom of the base of the leaves, and the palm tree has kind of enmeshed itself in the fruit and now hangs there like a body of a human that is dead, that is just sitting in the middle of an intersection. I had meant to pull it off and move it to the side, but there it is. And of course, when I see it, I think of death. I am not one who avoids the talk of death. In fact, I will talk about death with you and with my friends, in the social environment, anytime anybody wants to. Most people, however, are afraid to talk about death. Most people are, or they don't consider it important because they're young and they are full of life, so why talk about death? That has never been the case for me. I think very much after 8 years old, I was thinking about death, involved in the thoughts about death. But to complete this story of the palm tree leaf which is hanging in front of me, about 4 days ago I saw the light green leaf protruding from the top of the palm tree. And when I saw that leaf coming out and in its young self, fully exploring life, just like any young being, reaching up towards the sky, full of newness, full of energy to grow bigger. And then now I knew from seeing that palm leaf towering over the entire tree that a leaf below it would age and fall off. And so the cycle is complete. I do and consider myself very similar to that palm leaf that is hanging at the fruit. I am not in that position yet because that is death, but I am in that position where I am browning. I am like the palm leaf that is starting to brown at its edges and will continue to brown until I fall off the palm tree. And there are plenty of young palm leaves growing up around me. It is ridiculous of me to conceive in my browning edges, hanging at the base of the growing palm tree, how and why I would ever be at the top of the palm tree again. It is not possible. Delusion can lead me to think that, but it's not possible. So for me, it's all a process, or all a process is good, of fully embracing my dying, fully embracing death, fully understanding why I say I am. In this simple phrase, so simple, there is a question, there is a yearning, there is a fully expressed notion of truth, a fully developed understanding of life. So simple, 3 letters, 2 sounds, I am. That's why I say it in the beginning. Once I am that brown palm tree hanging from fruit or lying in the grass, I don't say that anymore. There are several people in history who have brought my attention to I am. One is Yeshua, who is one of my favorite historical figures. One is Gurdjieff, who is one of my favorite spiritual teachers, but who I would never study from. I like his books, I like Beelzebub's Tales, I like his writings, I like his stories, I like how he handled his classes, I like how he handled his talkative students, how they talked too much, and how he treated them. I also Don Juan also. Don Juan is one of those figures who is possibly existing and possibly not. It's hard to say. I accept him as a being who existed because his energy as a written character seems to transcend the pages of Castaneda and seems to hearken to a being, a shaman who did exist in Mexico, in the tribal peoples all through the Americas. So I hold him as a real person who existed, just as I am real now, and when I am dead, then I will have a certain kind of that too, a sort of hazy, fictional quality to me, to the energy that is left of me in the universe, let us say. So I don't go, what is death? Because that is something that is unanswerable in my position. More, I say, death is an inevitable part of living. Inevitable. Therefore, how does one approach it? How does one interact with this upcoming inevitable happenstance? I can at times be fictional and start wondering about after death, what happens, I'm dead, does my spirit live on, what do I do, and meet the all, and I've had a near-death experience, so I have a certain amount of information. But more I come into that place of I am and then death. So those two put together come to a moment, and that moment is extremely special. I consider it as special a moment as anything that I can conceive of. Why? Because here we are sitting, here I am, I don't know, we, all of a sudden I'm a we, or a we. I am sitting, I am very much in the moment, I am very present. So, what really is that, to be present? To be with the palm tree, to be with the lizards, to be with the snails, to be with the butterflies, to be with the trees, the palms, the frangipanis, the iridescent leaves. To be. I am. So, because it's so important, the thing that I have come up with and what I feel is really important is to die well. Not to die, not to peter off and wither away. And why is dying well so important? I consider that dying well is that moment right before death, when you are capable still of saying I am, so that all those moments come together in a perfect presentation, or a perfect presence and a perfect awareness. Because I'm very aware right now. I'm very aware when I do these talks. I'm very aware when I sit with people and listen to them. I consider myself an extremely aware being. I'm very present. That's why I can listen so well. And in that presence, I also allows me to be extremely intolerant of those things that are intolerant of me. it is important to be tolerant. But once that tolerance causes beings to be intolerant, then it is not correct to be tolerant. It's not correct to be tolerant of racism. It is not correct to be tolerant of Nazism. It is not correct to be tolerant of Roman imperialism. It is not correct for people to torture others for their race. Those are not things to be tolerated. So you have that issue of, to be a tolerant being, which I am. When does that tolerance end? God, I love my digressions. It's very funny. So I was talking about dying well. I would talk to my mother so often about dying well. It was so important to me to, I remember something. Another reason that dying well became important for me is that there was a woman in my life who was my mother's best friend, probably her best friend. She had a couple. Another extraordinarily beautiful brown-skinned being, incredibly energetic and incredibly intelligent. In my shyness, she would chase me around the house and give me this big kiss. And this was a game we played because I was shy and and this kiss was just so embarrassing to have this kiss. But she would call my name and then she would chase me around the house until she finally cornered me, and then she would give me this big kiss. And there are many reasons this kiss was, I could call it intense, was because she had these beautiful, big lips. So a kiss from her was just so big. And as a shy young being, it was so humiliating to get this kiss from her. And she liked doing that to me. As we aged and as she moved towards death, and as I watched her move towards death, and she could no longer chase me around, and I became one of her caretakers, I watched her wither. I watched her fear of death cause her to wither in a way that was so difficult for me. She was such an energetic being, such a powerhouse. And here she was in this state of constant fear of the upcoming death, and withered away. Her eventual death was extremely humiliating. Not only did she wither in herself, but she withered away the funds of her family, and she withered away on an operating table, away from everybody, away from us. It seems like what happened was that they gave her this, sedation, and the sedation caused her to go a certain way, and then her kidney failed, and then this happened, and she was on tubes, and then she was gone. Never saw it, never was in contact. It happened in the operating room. This is not the way to die. That is not dying well. So, upon experiencing her death that way, I really focused in on what is dying well. That is not dying well. Nor did my mother die well. And I could almost say that almost all those beings around me, almost all of them did not die well. The advertising of the times is to advertise fear of death. This is one of the major advertising, and it's subtle. It's so subtle. Phones have it. Phones are full of it. It's propagating this notion that you beware, you die and you're going to go to hell, or something really icky is going to happen, or something's. And this is just fantasy. But that is a way of controlling people. Dying well is to be fully ready for death. As Hamlet says, the readiness is all. To be ready, not to shirk it, not to run from it, not to say no, 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 and then take a bunch of drugs to last longer. Which brings me to the topic of all the people who have died in my life. The people who have been the closest to me, the beings who have been I've loved the most, have all died far away from me, far away from my experience. My grandfather crossed the country. My mother, I was in Mexico. I have a few others, but I'm not able at the moment to conjure their names or their... Dying well is to be ready and to embrace your death fully, to be present, to be able to be and die. I am gone. How do you do that? That's the question. How do you fully do that? There are no models for it. The closest that I can see is Don Juan. He speaks of it. But few others do. And I blame that on all of the religions because religions control you through death, as I have been speaking of. So if you are controlled by death and you are in total fear, then how can you die well? How can you? That's not possible, because you're in fear as you go to death. All my workout, all my performance, everything is based on my I could call it desire, I could call it yearning, I could call it let's call it yearning. Stay with that. Yearning to die well. Performance, I call so that I will die well. I stay fit so that I will die well. I don't stay fit to be afraid and live a long time. Living a long time is not interesting to me, because that is afraid of death. I have a friend who is extremely wealthy, and he is afraid of death. He takes a lot of drugs. He enjoys taking a lot of drugs, as I call power tools. He takes a lot of power tools. He uses them a lot. I could say too much, because I'm very strict about power tools, but I won't. It's his choice. I want to return to something I didn't finish. So a lot of the people I loved have disappeared from my life at distance. I have no contact with them, so I have no connection to their death. Whereas there are people who have been, could almost call them horrors in my life, who have died really, within my sphere, so completely in my vicinity. A woman who's was a horror of a talkative, just talkative, selfish, egotistical person. Her whole being was to talk at you. You couldn't get away, you couldn't stop her, you couldn't do it, you couldn't tell her to shut up. She just talked and talked and talked. You had to walk out of the room and just go away. I was at her moment. Another man, same. Fear of death forever. He just was afraid of death, afraid. And died right there. Right, I believe I carried him to his deathbed within a couple of hours of his dying. It's such an irony. It's such an irony that those people I have loved the most, I have not been at that moment, and those people who have been the most terrorizing in my life, I have been there. That neither died well. So I could take that as an illustration. They both were extremely afraid and terrorized by it. Both of them full of themselves and egotistical. Dying well is the foremost focus of my work. In dying well is my morality also. In dying well is my consciousness. In dying well is my presence. In dying well is my ability to listen. In dying well is my full embracing of I am.